Hi, everyone. I'm Hanako Wakatsuki, and it is a great pleasure to welcome you to the first installment of Tadaima Fine Arts Friday Artist Talk. So, let's see, today marks the anniversary of two important events in the history of U.S. race relations. Juneteenth is the oldest commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. On June 1st, 1865, Union soldiers delivered General Order Number 3, which read in part, "The people of Texas are informed in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes between them, the employers, and hired laborers." The official Juneteenth poem, "We Rose" by Christina K. Robinson, is a moving tribute to those who suffered under slavery and continue to suffer under the racism that we've clearly seen these past few weeks. Here's her poem. "From Africa's heart we rose, already people, our faces a bone, our bodies lean, we rose, skills of art, life, beauty, and family. Crushed by forces we knew nothing of, we rose. Survive we must, we did. We rose. We rose to be you, we rose to be me. Above everything expected, we rose. To become the knowledge we never knew. We rose, dream, we did, act we must." Also, 38 years ago, Vincent Chin was out celebrating his bachelor party and was attacked by Ronald Evans and Michael Nitz. Although Chin was Chinese American, he was mistaken for being of Japanese descent and was blamed in part for the success of the Japanese auto industry in the United States. Chin died 4 days later. The two men who killed him were each fined $3,000 and sentenced to 3 years probation with no jail time. In response to protests over the sentencing, the presiding judge, Charles Kaufman, said, "These weren't the kind of men you send to jail. You don't make the punishment fit the crime. You make the punishment fit the criminal." Both Evans and Nitz were brought up on federal charges of violating Chin's civil rights. Evans was found guilty and Nitz was acquitted. On appeals, Evans' conviction was overturned and in his retrial was cleared of all charges. In this context, with these two events, that Japanese immigrants and their descendants were incarcerated in a series of camps throughout North America. As a result of racism, both overt and covert, personal and institutional, they were denied their freedom and dignity. But the incarcerees persevered. We are here today, attending Tadaima as a result of their determination. We honor all those who are incarcerated, we mourn those we've lost, and we celebrate the spirit that remains. It is an honor to introduce you to today's featured artist, Setsuko Winchester. I remember seeing a press release about her Yellow Bow project and was struck by the simple elegance of the photograph of yellow T-bulls taken at the 10 WRA camps and at other sites of significance related to the incarceration and how the presence of those bulls surrogates for the people incarcerated in the American concentration camps transformed the place. Setsuko Winchester was born in New York City to Japanese immigrant parents and first worked in finance in the late 80s before turning to journalism after graduating from the Graduate School of Journalism at New York University in the early 90s. She began first as an editor and producer at WNYC in New York City and then at NPR in Washington, D.C. for Morning Edition and Talk of the Nation. Throughout it all, she maintained an avid interest in ceramics after receiving instructions from a ceramics professor who studied under the famed ceramicist Toshiko Takezu. In 2006, she moved to Western Massachusetts to pursue a lifelong interest in ceramics and the visual arts. Together with her writer husband, she embraced the rural life, learning how to make organic cider, harvesting honey, raise chickens, as well as helping to found the local newspaper in her town of Sandusfield, Massachusetts. In 2012, after the death of her mother, she began looking into her own history and into the history of Japanese Americans and Asian peoples in the United States. So to you, the community of Tadaima, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Setsuko Winchester.
Hi, Hanako. I just want to thank you for stepping in at the last minute. John Tonai, who's the curator of this whole series, was supposed to be interviewing me today, and Hanako just stepped in right now. You did an amazing job, and I just want to thank you. And I'm really honored to be one of the first artists. I know John and I were talking about how so few of us have actually been to all 10, and I feel fortunate to have visited each one of these places, as well as some of the internment camps. The 10 that I'm talking about are the U.S. concentration camps for U.S. citizens of Japanese ancestry who were incarcerated during World War II. And so growing up, I didn't really know anything about what happened to Japanese Americans. We were always told that there was this war with, Japan and America, and that, that's just, there was war and nobody really talked about it. And so it was only after my mother's death that I started to look into it. And I have to say, I only heard about the mass incarceration, forced removal of Japanese Americans in junior high school from a substitute teacher who brought Farewell to Manzanar to school and told us the story. And everybody in my class said, they never heard of it. 2 boys said that can't happen in America. And one of them said, if it did, she ought to know, looked at me, and I didn't know anything. And I have to say that I never looked into it until about 7 years ago. And I didn't go into it looking for anything untoward about FDR or anything like that. But this story shows that the 4 freedoms that FDR had famously talked about on January 6, 1941, where he said the 4 essential human rights, which should be available for all people everywhere in the world: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear, was not available for any of these people. So in December of 2015, I started to go to all these camps, and we drove to the first one in Rower, Arkansas. And hello, Hanako, are you there? Is she still there?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So this photo is a picture of Rower, the Camp Rower in Arkansas. And if we could change to the next one. There were 2 in Arkansas. There were 26 miles apart, and in the center, this is Jerome, and in the center of Jerome and Rower is a museum in McGehee. And this image, I lined them up in a row, and you could see in the far distance there's a chimney. That is one of the original structures that's left from the camps, and that was the chimney for the hospital. And the previous picture, which is Rower, I arranged them so they look like they're laborers in the fields or whatever. So each place I went to, I just sort of got there, and then I arranged all my T-balls. And basically the T-balls represent, each one is 1,000 individuals. I hand pinched 120 yellow T-balls, each crafted by family. So one family, let's say 2 parents, a set of grandparents and some teenagers and some children, will all be glazed the same combination of yellow or the type of yellow, and will have the same foot. So these all represent people and families. So I took 120 of them and visited all of the 10 camps. So that's what this project is. So that was Rower and Jerome. And I think when I went there to the museum, the sign for the museum was shut off. So when we got to inside, this sort of, dirty blonde-haired woman came up to us and started to tell us about the history of mass incarceration, forced removal of Japanese Americans, and I had to say to her, can I just ask you a question after a while? I said, what's with that sign? So she said, well, things happen. So I said, no, what kind of things happen? So she says, well, sometimes you come in and people have, caused some mischief outside, or sometimes people come in who don't like what we are doing at the museum, and they'll, tell us, why are you doing this to people who tried to kill us? So I said to her, so why are you doing this? And she said, I'm doing this because my father worked at the camps, and he said that these people didn't do anything wrong. And she said, I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. And to me, that was one of the most powerful stories to me early on, because I was a journalist. I had, worked in journalism for 10 years. I'm Japanese American, and I never looked into this story. So there are people out there who realize that this needs to be known. And I think it's appropriate that this story comes out on Juneteenth, because as we all know, racism, maybe slavery ended, but racism did not end on Juneteenth. It continued. And there's a system of racism and race and a system of laws that prioritizes whiteness, which is what this action had to do with. So then after Arkansas, we headed further west, and the next photo should be Poston. Yeah, there it is. So Poston is in Arizona, and this is on Native American land. And one of the stories about Native American land is that when the Japanese Americans were first removed from the West Coast, no state wanted these people. They said, no Japs here. If they're dangerous on the West Coast, they're going to be dangerous here. So nobody would take them. And Milton Eisenhower, who was the first director of the WRA, the War Relocation Authority, somebody said to him, well, why don't you go to the Indian Bureau of Indian Affairs and see if you could put them on Indian land? And to most of the Indian tribes' credit, they said, no, we don't want to do to another group of people that was done to us. But two camps, said, okay, we'll take them. And one was Poston. And so this still has a lot of remains. This is one of the only camps that has adobe on it. And way in the distance in the middle, there's a water tower. That is a structure from the original times. And for a period, they were using these structures as a community center. And so most of this area is flat, dusty. There's nothing there. And supposedly this was the cement foundation for the school or something like that. But it was a shameful period. So when we visited, we actually encountered two young women. One was Native American, one was Native American and Latino, and they had never heard of what these places were. So that's how little we are taught about this story in the United States. So, and then after Poston, we headed further west to the next. Yeah, this is Manzanar. This is a very, very famous camp. And the day before I was headed out here, my husband, who's an author, he had to give a talk at Caltech, and we were given the Einstein suite at the Athenaeum there. And I was thinking, oh, this is where Einstein stayed. That's So anyway, there was a fancy dress party that evening, and I took out my dress and I put it in the shower to steam, and I turned on the television, and there was Mr. Trump, who was declared his candidacy for president, and he said, FDR used internment for the Japanese people, and I think it could be a solution for the Muslim problem. And the mayor of Roanoke repeated it, and everybody was like, "Oh wow, the solution for the Muslim problem." That's what I thought. Oh my God, I need to start finishing my project because this is not right. So anyway, the following day, I went to Manzanar, and this is a replica of what the guard towers were like, and there is an excellent interpretive center there. It's amazing. If you get a chance to ever get there, it's fantastic. The landscape is breathtaking, but it's not a place that anybody should live. And the proof of that is that no one lives there today. So anyway, so after Manzanar, we headed back east, back to another Native American camp, and this is called Gila River. And Gila River, actually, this is because of the Native Americans there. They have tried to preserve a lot of what was still there. And one of the sad stories about what happened to the Native Americans was that a lot of them, it really divided their community as well, because there were people that said, no, we don't want to do this. But then the government said, what if we give you infrastructure, water pipes, schools, buildings, all kinds of things. So some of the leaders said, okay. And the sad thing is that after the war ended and all the incarcerees were forced to leave, the federal government took most of the infrastructure from all of these locations. So, they even broke their promise on that promise. And the Native American story is, in many ways, the mass removal of Japanese Americans is a mini Indian Removal Act of 1830. And so it's part of the systemic racism, but I will explain that more later. So after Gila River, we headed further back east to head home. And this is in Colorado. This is Amache. And the significance of Colorado was that after the two camps were placed in Native American land, they still had, thousands and thousands of people that had been removed and put into assembly camps, and they had to be put into more permanent concentration centers, prisons. Finally, Governor Carr of California said, if nobody else will take these people, I will. Colorado, the governor of Colorado. He said, I will take these people because they're talented farmers. And that's when Milton Eisenhower said, oh, talented farmers, I should go to the Farm Bureau. So he went to the Farm Bureau and he said, hey, we have really talented farmers. Do anybody want these people in your state? All of a sudden, Idaho, Wyoming, Arkansas, I'll take two. All these other states started saying they'll take it, but with the stipulation that all these people had to be behind barbed wire and guarded with by the military and with soldiers. So that's how a lot of these other camps came to be. This is a replica of one of the, what their camps look like. And there's a guard tower, guard tower you could see sort of to the right. That's a replica. And that water tower is from the original, and supposedly it's still being used. And so this image, I sort of did it to look like, different groups. These are a bunch of moms or women looking after the little children. To the left is a group of older children with a teacher. To the right, I think of it as laborers going out to the field. So this is also, I arrange it so that it looks like I'm trying to recreate what some of the activities may have been. So that's what that's about. And then we headed back. This was the winter of 2015. We headed back to Massachusetts. And the following spring, if you could go to the next picture. The following spring, in May of 2016, we headed to the 4 final northern camps. And this is Heart Mountain. And that is the chimney from the original hospital. And Heart Mountain had one of the best interpretive centers. It was a really amazing place. It's private. It's this camp is also significant because this is where the 85 resistors were. I think it's 85. The resistors were people who contested the constitutionality of imprisoning loyal citizens of the United States who had never been charged, who had done nothing wrong, and yet they lost their homes, their businesses, all their possessions, and were put into prison. So a bunch of them took it to court. They lost, and they ended up in federal penitentiary. So it's a very tragic story of in some ways, true Americans. They fought for the Constitution. So I think we need to remember these people, and that people did resist. People did challenge the government's actions. And there were also people who challenged it outside, like Fred Korematsu, Gordon Hirabayashi, Akira Minoru Yasui, and Mitsui Endo. But that will come up later. And then the next camp is Minidoka, and this is where Hanako. I met Hanako there. But this camp, this image is one of my favorites. Way in the back is the food. The root cellar is the root cellar where they put all their the food that they had grown, and it was stored in there. And I set up the tea bowls along this path, and you could see this major storm coming. And I thought, I have to get this picture right away. But this image to me embodies what I was feeling was coming to America. I felt like there was this storm coming to America. And that's why this is one of, to me, visually, one of the most powerful images of the trip. So anyway, and Minidoka, if anybody has a chance to go there, it's amazing place. They've restored some of the buildings, and there's a great interpretive center there. And also, it was one of the few places that you drove around and you saw these barracks here and there. They exist, like on the farms, because they were sold off to what they called settlers. Most of them were soldiers coming back from the war, and they actually sold off these buildings that were full of Japanese Americans, incarcerees' possessions, because when they were forced to leave, they could only take what they could carry again. And, they were given, most of them were given $25 in a bus ticket to, wherever they could go. So it's a really amazing, powerful place to go. So if you get a chance, go and say hello to Hanako. And then the next place this is Tule Lake. Tule Lake that was a prison within a prison. Tule Lake was where all the people who had answered no, they were called the no boys, to a loyalty questionnaire that was given to all people that I think that were 17 years of age or older, and they had to, or 18 years and older, and they had to answer, if they would be willing to serve any, serve for the military for their country. And a lot of people said, yes, of course, as soon as you let me out of prison, then I will, or I will if you, also let out my family. So if you qualified that question in any way, it was considered a no. So you had one no. The question number 28 was even more controversial because it said, are you willing to, swear allegiance to the United States and forswear allegiance to the Japanese emperor? And a lot of them were like, well, of course I'll forswear, I'm loyal to the United States, but, the Japanese, he's not my emperor, and I'm not a citizen of Japan. And a lot of the Japanese had never even been to Japan or didn't even speak Japanese. So that question was not only offensive, but they also, a lot of, the parents of Japanese, U.S. citizens of Japanese ancestry, of which, like a third were Japanese immigrants. They were never allowed to naturalize because of U.S. law. It said that Japanese were excluded from naturalizing. So it wasn't out of choice. It was the law said, no, you can't be a citizen. So, they thought that, I'm not loyal to the emperor. But if they said yes to that, there would be, admitting some kind of treason or something, and it wasn't true. So then they would write no. So that would mean, you had two no's and you were called the no-nos. All the no-nos and their families were sent to Tule Lake. And this was the jail within a jail. And when I got here, I always ask, anybody who's there, if there is anybody there, if they see any trouble. And this is National Parks Ranger Kenneth Doubt was kind enough to show us around. And when I asked him this question, he said, well, what do you mean by that? So I said, I told him about the first camp in Rower and McGehee and how the sign for the museum was shot up with the shotgun. And he said, well, if you mean were things shot up, this is the West. Everyone has a gun, everything gets shot up. So I can't say whether, it's because of racism or, the shooting up is because of anything to do with that. But I can say that as of December of 2015, when Mr. Trump said that FDR used internment for the Japanese people and that could be a solution for the Muslim problem, all of a sudden, he said there were all these people who had never heard of these camps who were coming to find out how it worked. So it's really disturbing how today's story of these camps and these prisons are being described. So that is totally not true, and people need to know that. So anyway, that's and that structure is actually the jail, and it's amazing how just one little room, they fit like 25 people in there. And I went in there with a group of 10 students, and it was very, very uncomfortable. So you can imagine people, like 25 adults being in that little square space for months and months and months. So anyway, it's a very, very powerful and interesting place to go. So anybody who gets a chance definitely should. And then after that, we headed back east. And this was the last camp. This is the 10th concentration camp, and in Topaz, Utah. And the reason why I put the bowls in this configuration is because I believe it was, this was block 29. And that's because this is where the church was. And there were a lot of Christian Japanese Americans or Japanese. They had converted to Christianity. Some of them came over because they were Christian. And so if we're talking about religion, it means that even if you were Christian, it didn't matter. It just mattered that you were Japanese. So it was about systemic racism, and it's about you know, racism that in many ways this was a way to get rid of the few that were here, because most Japanese were excluded from immigrating to the United States, first in 1908 and then definitively as of 1924. So by 1942, most of them had been here for decades, generations, and they were U.S. citizens. So this is an American story about what the U.S. government did to U.S. citizens. So it's not a Japanese story. It's not a Japanese American story. It's an American story that happened in America. So anyway, and then in addition to the 10 camps, I also visited some places. This is Four Freedoms Park at the tip of Roosevelt Island in Manhattan. And if you look down the line of T-balls at the very end, at that square is a black dot. That is actually a bust of FDR. And on the other side of that wall are the four freedoms. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. All four of those freedoms were denied these people. So this illustrates the fact that all these T-balls lie outside of those freedoms. And one of the reasons why I wanted to take it here is because I was born in New York City, and just a few blocks away is the right on the other side to the right is the United Nations. And my family has an apartment a few blocks away from the United Nations. And I used to be able to run over to the East River, and you could see the tip of this island. So I thought once I started going to all the camps, I wanted to take my T-balls there to make a statement about what four freedoms meant to some people, and that they weren't available for everyone, everywhere in the world. And then the next place I took them to regarding the concept of freedom in America is the steps of the Supreme Court. And I lined them up in 9 columns for the 9 justices, and the four T-balls at the top, which sort of mirror the triangle at the top of the Supreme Court. Those 4 T-balls represent the 4 people who took who challenged the mass incarceration, the curfew, the travel restrictions, and incarceration of a loyal U.S. citizen that's been proven loyal. And Mitsui Endo actually was worked for the government and was found to be loyal, and yet she was still incarcerated. So out of those 4, she was the only one that was found innocent, but the other 4 were found by a packed court to be legal for military necessity, which one of the justices said was a smoking gun for the future. And as we could see, Mr. Trump was using Executive Order 9066 in many ways to round up anybody they want to, because it's a military necessity. So that's it leaves a broad spectrum of to be able to incarcerate innocent citizens of the United States. A story I have here is that while I was laying out these T-balls, this young black boy came up to me and he said, "What are you doing?" And I told him about the story of, of these T-balls and the places they went and what happened. And he said, we had, we had concentration camps in the United States. We imprisoned, Japanese people in America. So I said, yeah. So he said, "No shit." Ooh, I shouldn't have cursed, but anyway, that's what he said. And then he went back to his mom and he said, "Did you know this?" And she said she didn't know either. And she, so this shows you how little we are taught this story in America. And then the next image is, let's see. Oh, this is also in Washington, D.C., and this is the memorial to Japanese American patriotism. And along the back wall, there are 10 panels, which have the names of all 10 of the U.S. concentration camps and the number of people that were incarcerated in there. And the T-balls go around in a spiral around this statue, and it's of a crane entangled in barbed wire. So this is also a memorial to Japanese American patriotism, because many Japanese American boys volunteer to go serve in the U.S. military to fight in World War II, despite the fact that their parents, siblings, or wives were still left in concentration camps. And they made up the 100th Battalion and the 442nd, and a lot of them went in to the military MIS, Military Information Service, and also some served as nurse in the Nurses Corps. But in the end, 9,486 Purple Hearts were awarded, 4,000 Bronze Stars, 560 Silver Stars, 29 Distinguished Service Crosses, 29 Medals of Honor, and 7 Presidential Unit Citations were given to these people, despite the fact that their families were put into concentration camps and all their possessions were taken away. And they were recognized as the most decorated military unit in U.S. military history for its size and duration. So that's how there were two different ways of getting out of the camps, or two different ways that people tried to show their patriotism or their loyalty to the United States. One fighting for the Constitution, and one fighting in the military, because they thought, I guess, unless we serve, we have to, spill blood in order to prove our loyalty, then we will do that. So that's what this story is about. And the next image, that is, this is the FDR Library Museum. After I had been traveling around a lot, the FDR Library found out what I was doing, and they contacted me. And the director of the museum said, I want to invite you to bring your 120 T-balls, and you could create a site-specific image anywhere you want to. So, they gave me, a free carte blanche to go wherever I wanted to. And I was just walking outside, and this is called Freedom Court. And if you'll notice, there's a statue of a man and a woman, and at the bottom it says freedom from fear. And I thought, that's the name of my project, Freedom from Fear Yellow Bowl Project. So I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to arrange my tea bowls. And so that sculpture is actually the figure of a man and a woman cut out of the Berlin Wall. So that's supposed to, represent freedom. So I put my yellow tea bowls into the shape of a yellow man. So it's supposed to look like a yellow man. Somebody said, is that a cross or whatever? But it's supposed to look like a person, like the cutout. And it's to show that these Japanese Americans were not given, the protections of the four freedoms. And that is a bust of FDR. So this is right under FDR's nose. He didn't give freedoms to these people. And also, he made them the object of fear. They were the object of the freedom from fear. You're supposed to be free of fear from them. So anyway, that was thanks to the FDR Library and the director there, Paul Sparrow. So, and then after that, this let me see. Oh, there's one image that's missing, but oh well. Anyway, then I took them. This is Ellis Island. And the reason why Ellis Island is important is because we often, and the news media often says Japanese American internment camp. And theoretically, not theoretically, it's actually wrong about the 10 camps. The 10 camps were US concentration camps or War Relocation Authority, which was a euphemism. And FDR's administration called it concentration camps. If you look at their papers, that's what they called it at the time. And they actually called for the use of concentration camps way before Pearl Harbor. So if people say that you had, which actually I've been told many, many times, you had to be put away Pearl Harbor. That's it. You had to be put away Pearl Harbor. That's what we're told. That was actually not true. The plan was already in place before Pearl Harbor. So anyway, the reason why I took them to Ellis Island is because in 1998, there was an extraordinary exhibition that opened up here to explain the difference between concentration camps and internment camps. And Ellis Island was an internment camp for Japanese Americans who were enemy, they were called enemy aliens. If you were not a citizen and you were Japanese, you were declared an enemy alien and you were rounded up by the FBI. And this is where the Japanese in the New York East Coast, Northeast Coast area were held. So I only brought 16 of the tea bowls because this was to show that, not all of them ended up at the U.S. concentration camps. Some of them were rounded up and put into the U.S. internment camps, which were run by the Justice Department and by the Immigration Naturalization Service, which is ICE. This was, ICE. And then the next image. This is another internment camp, and this is called Hanauliuli. And this is, they just recently discovered this in 2002, and it was declared a national monument by Obama in 2015. And I was lucky enough to be able to visit it. It's not fully opened, but you can make special trips. They have special days where you could go there. But this is where, thousands were held. Most of them were prisoners of war, and it was an internment camp. It was for foreign nationals, and Japanese Americans in Hawaii were not rounded up, forced out of their homes, and incarcerated en masse into concentration camps. They were actually put under house arrest. So there was concentration camps did not exist in Hawaii, ironically, because there were actually more persons of Japanese ancestry on Hawaii than there were on the mainland. And research, we found out that General Emmons, General Delos Emmons, who was in charge of Hawaii, the general in charge of Hawaii, said, no, these people are loyal. We don't need to put them in. The other thing scholars have found out is that one of the reasons that they needed them was that they needed to rebuild Pearl Harbor, ironically. So that's why they were put into camps. I think, is there another image? I'm trying to. Oh, this was the one that I was that I thought was missing. This actually is very important to me because this is at Four Freedoms Rotunda in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. I now live in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and this is where the Four Freedoms paintings by Norman Rockwell usually live. Right now they're touring around the country, but this is the image of freedom from fear. And it's a picture of parents tucking in their children to bed, safely, from, I guess, the yellow peril that would be these T-balls here. So I asked if I could create this site-specific image, and they let me do that. So that close-up of that T-ball in the front, I sort of feel like that's me. I'm what they were afraid of, and I just want to assure you that I'm not scary.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Setsuko. Like, you kind of covered everything, and it was actually pretty incredible where you're talking about all the nuances to the history, contextualizing the history, and you touched on basically the institutionalized racism, and then you even touched on terminology, which is really great. This is awesome. But we do have another program at the top of the hour, so I chose 3 questions that hopefully you could answer. So for the first one, let me see if I could get Mia Russell's one about the Nikkei.
Okay.
Maybe I need Kimiko to help out. But her question says, I'm also Nikkei, and I sometimes wonder my role in connecting to the JA camp history. Do you have to work up to feeling ownership or connection to it?
I don't think so. I think if you're an American, I think that we have a responsibility to acknowledge history, American history. And for us to not teach ourselves this history and the systemic racism that existed that put these people here is to put all the onus on Black people. Like as if, systemic racism only existed for Black people. No, it existed for Asian people as well. There was almost 100 years, over 100 years of anti-Asian legislation. And we have to speak up about it. We can't just hide it, because that is the proof that Black people need, that it's not their imagination. America had white supremacist laws, and we were part of it. So to not speak up about it, to turn away from it and say, hey, that's not me. We have to learn about it and say, hey, this happened to us, and it shouldn't happen to other people as well. So I think just as an American citizen, we have a responsibility to learn this. And if we are not interested in Japanese American history, who is going to be? We have to be. We need to share this. Yeah.
Well, thank you. The next one is kind of I think an easier question. Miyuki says, does the color of yellow have a special meaning for the bulls?
Yeah, it's to represent yellow peril. So they were called the yellow peril. So there's a long history of that goes back to the Chinese Exclusion Act. So
okay, and then I think maybe the last one we're going to go with is Clement Hanami says, artists are often defined by their medium like painters or sculptures. Your work is laden with different elements. How would you categorize your work and yourself with the contemporary art world?
Well, I use ceramics. Well, I'm a ceramicist, so I use ceramics, but I use photography. I use history. I use, I see the T-bowls as sculpture. I use site-specific places to tell the story. It's just conceptual art to me. This is about an idea. This is artwork about an idea, and I'm trying to tell a story. So just to quickly explain, the next part is called the descent colors, and this is a prototype. But in the middle it says exclusion, and the part 2 is going to be a series of collars, which I call descent colors inspired by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when she has a dissenting opinion, wears a collar that she calls a dissent collar. And so I'm dissenting to a lot of the laws that were passed during this time. So the dissent colors will feature all the, what I call the American whiteness laws, where you had to be white in order to naturalize. And one of the first laws was 1790's Naturalization Act. It was one of the earliest laws passed by the Continental Congress, who said who could become an American. And it said any alien, being a white person, could naturalize if you were of good character and you've been here for 2 years, and those prerequisites changed, but you had to be white. And any alien, basically, the first exclusion was the Native Americans. And all of the exclusion acts are based on Native Americans. So that's another story that we really need to look at.
Well, thank you so much, Setsuko. I'm looking forward to your project to see that. And for everyone online, thank you for participating. Definitely check out her website to get more information. And then also at the top of the hour, we're doing a Facebook watch party for the opening. So if you guys, after this, tune into that, and then we'll chat a little bit more on that forum. Again, thank you so much, Setsuko. And I hope you have a good evening. And yeah. So have a good one. Thank you. Good night.